Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really exciting to talk to you. You and I have had the chance to talk a few times in the past, and you have a very compelling personal story that's a little different than a lot of people in this industry. For many, it's a higher calling, it's a career. For you, there's a bit of a personal driver here. Talk a little bit about that if you could.
Absolutely, Michael. Thanks for having me today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Absolutely, it's been a personal journey for me as a social entrepreneur. My background starting as a genomics data scientist, coming out of Virginia Tech and going to NIH, FDA for first 5-6 years of my postdoctoral career. I was already involved in analyzing precision medicine and genomic data. But when I and my wife had a child with a rare disease in 2012, that became personal and exposed me to the patient and family perspectives and the pains they go through, particularly with rare disease. There is a long diagnostic odyssey, which in our case was 9 months, a full-term birth of a child, which at birth was diagnosed with Edwards syndrome and had to be put on ventilators in the NICU immediately. And so it was very difficult for us to pull the plug 4 days later, and that gave me the personal, experience, lived experience of the pains going through that whole life cycle in a very short period of time. So took some time to do some soul searching, and then got involved and became an advocate, with the rare disease patient advocacy movement. Connected with the Office of Rare Disease Research at NIH and a lot of very good organizations such as NORD and Global Genes and Every Life Foundation. And I co-founded the National Organization for Rare Disorders in India, which one did not exist back in 2013, and also published a review article, and what are the challenges and opportunities for patients with rare disease in India and other countries, as we have achieved a lot of progress in the US over the last 40 years of the US Orphan Drug Act of 1983. And yesterday was Rare Disease Day, which was observed globally. And that's very personal to me. It's become a day that's more important than my own birthday. I don't prepare a month for my birthday, but I do for Rare Disease Day. And I was honored to have a fireside chat with Dr. Abby S. Mayers, who actually started and sparked the rare revolution in championing the Orphan Drug Act in 1983. So long story short, coming out of that social entrepreneurial advocacy mindset, I started identifying what are the unmet needs for drug discovery and development, as 93% of rare diseases still remain without any treatment options. And the cost of making new treatments continues to deteriorate. It's now exceeded $2.5–3 billion to bring one successful treatment to patients through the regulatory process. And that's because 9 out of 10 drugs fail through the valley of death, as we know. And so it's very unsustainable. And it takes maybe 10–12 years on an average after a drug is discovered in the laboratory to when it actually makes it to the clinic. And so how do we speed up this process and make it more sustainable, industrialized, so we can go after these 10,867 rare diseases, which most of them remain without any approved treatment. But now we have huge opportunity and hope with gene therapies being almost curative, and we have 2,000 clinical trials going on around cell and gene therapies with potential to cure these genetic diseases. However, most of these clinical trials happen in the United States and Europe, offering very little access or hope for patients living in other regions like India or Africa and Latin America and so on. And so when we look at this clinical trials map on clinicaltrials.gov globally, 90% of them happen in US and Europe, especially the rare disease trials. And so that's one, not good science, as there is a significant lack of global diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And two, it's very inefficient and slow, because one, these regions are the most expensive regions of the world. And two, they are predominantly Caucasian population. And and three, it's not humanitarian because the people are people everywhere, and we need to gain access, help them access these treatments long before they are actually approved during the development process itself. And so really encouraged to see a lot of recognition and action, not just lip service, but action taken by the US FDA recently by championing this patient affairs and patient-focused drug development paradigm, patient listening sessions, where we are encouraging people from India and the rest of the world to have their voices be heard by the FDA and the industry so that they can understand the heterogeneity in these rare diseases. You know, if you pick any single rare disease, most of them are single gene mutation causing disease, but the heterogeneity in terms of symptoms and phenotypes can be significantly varied. And so if we need to understand the full complexity of a disease, we need data from patients all over the world. That's what has been my mission, to enable that access, whether through awareness, education, advocacy, through the nonprofit Indo-US Organization for Rare Diseases that I founded, or through Jeeva, where it's the technology platform. You know, we have all these wonderful telemedicine and digital engagement, remote patient monitoring and engagement technologies, which have not been fully adopted and implemented in clinical trials in particular. And so that's a specific gap that I have been focused on over the last 5 years in building that at Jeeva.
Now, you mentioned the FDA, and you've alluded a bit to what industry could do, but maybe if you could drill down a little bit more, what would you like to see, broadly speaking, the clinical trial industry do to advance, research into rare diseases? It's so disparate. It's obviously it's harder than the cancer moonshot or something in a sense because it's so scattered. But what would you like to see industry do?
So number one, go global. Rare diseases are a global issue. It's not, they don't have any boundaries. Like we only occur in the United States or this country. And so that's how we have to treat this as a disease and a disease population on a global scale. One, that will help cover the full heterogeneity of the disease, and two, it will enable access to everybody, irrespective of their geographic location. So that's a way of discriminating, right? So if you're restricting it to a specific geography. And three, most companies struggle with patient recruitment in the US, and we have 60% of the biotechnology industry funding happening in the US on a global scale. But this industry needs to thrive, and for that they need access to patients from the industry perspective as well. And then it's not just humanitarian, but it makes business sense. And so that's the big change that I like industry to see. And this is a golden opportunity because until 4 years ago, 3 years ago, this was not very well defined, and FDA did not have proper guidelines on how to execute decentralized clinical trials or remote patient engagement and so on. It was meant for brick and mortar, traditional, every visit has to be in person at a site, and these sites were mostly located in these geographies. So now we have that FDA is encouraging and has provided proper guidelines over the recent years since the pandemic. And so I think the industry should just embrace it.
Harsha, thank you so much for joining us. This has been very inspiring and very encouraging. And I hope you'll come back and join us soon to give us an update on your progress and how you see the industry showing progress, hopefully, and advancement to deal with rare diseases.
I would love to do so, Michael, anytime. Thanks for having me.